Hello, everyone, and welcome to another awesome episode of the Coach Tribe podcast. Today, we have an incredible guest, Sally. Sally is an award-winning speaker and speaker coach whose mission is to create talks that move their audiences and the world. After 20 plus years of honing her craft, again, 20 plus years, Sally coaches big-hearted entrepreneurs and change makers to step on the stage and speak their story in a way that move audiences with authenticity, clarity, and courage. Sally, it is a pleasure to have you here with us. Hello, and how are you?
Thank you, Maria. I'm so great and excited to be here. I love talking about all of these things, and especially with other coaches, because you as coaches have so much to offer the world. And I'm like a professional nudger, just nudging everybody out front to share what they know and who they are.
Now, Sally, please tell us, why should people listen to this episode?
Well, because if you want to grow your audience, if you want to have a transformative impact, which is coaches, that is, of course, what we're trying to do, then we have to come from behind the scenes in our own business. We really have to step out on stage. And I use that term very loosely, but people need to know who you are. People buy from people. And so they can't just trust that your blog posts or all of the things that we're doing to try and connect with our audience and grow, that is enough. They want to see your face. They want to hear your stories. They want to know from where you learned everything that you've learned that you now want to turn and pass down and pass along to your audience. And speaking is the way that we do that. And that word can freak some people out, but it doesn't have to be complicated. And even if you don't have the dream of being a professional capital S speaker, speaking is an essential part of your coaching business. And so I would love to help you embrace that more and to find some confidence in your story, in who you are, and that there is magic in that your audience is just dying to hear. They are waiting for you to be brave and share your stories and share who you are.
Well, let me tell you, Sally, I am dying to hear everything that you have to share with us today. And you mentioned this word, story. And the more I am into this coaching industry, the more I learn the importance of storytelling and how this is actually at the core of everything that we do, our marketing, our selling, our mindset, the storytelling, the story that we tell, first of all, ourselves, and then to those from outside is what makes a difference.
It's everything.
I just want to clarify, when you mention speaking, do you refer to public speaking, to speaking in a live? What does that mean to you in this context of the coaching industry?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because a lot of people bring baggage into this idea of speaking. Like, we all know it's a big fear for most people. Even as a professional myself, of course, I feel fears. Like, it is part of this vulnerability that we are stepping into when we speak. And the thing is, speaking is not just for those big, like, conference keynote moments. Those are awesome. And yes, we want those for our business and our visibility and our growth. But speaking is also how you show up on social media. It is doing podcasts like this. It is workshops. It's all these little elements of our business. It's communication to your audience in a way where you want to have an impact. Okay, so it's an intentional leveraging of your voice and your stories and your expertise to connect with your audience. So if you use that definition, you're doing it already, probably, hopefully. As a coach, like, you need to be speaking. And so I work with people all along that journey when they're just trying to get clarity about their message and find the confidence to really step on the free stages like social media and all of those opportunities that we have, all the way to, okay, I've got my message and now I really want to scale it. I want to leverage this message to be an intentional part of my business as a coach, to bring more people into my business, to leverage my story, to connect more deeply in a really resonant way so that when somebody hears you, they say, that's my person. And I'm going to go wherever she's going. That's where I'm going. That is what speaking can do. So it's the whole spectrum of it. So if you're like, I'm not a speaker and I don't really speak, it's like, well, guess what? You probably do. You probably are. And if you want to have the impact that you like deep down in your gut are like, oh, I want that, speaking is going to be a part of that.
The definition is pretty wide, and you are right. Speaking is us in the end, because you said you are. Yeah, that's what speaking is. It's basically us in all of the aspects of our communication. And since we were mentioning the definition of speaking, can you tell us what storytelling means and how does storytelling fit into the context of coaching?
Okay, I'm so glad you asked this. So I started out speaking to teenagers long time ago, forever ago. So as you mentioned, I've been doing this a really long time. And I was talking to teenagers about these big ideas. It was kind of like a coaching moment, but I'm up in front of 150 14-year-olds or 15-year-olds, right? Like they are not necessarily jazzed to be there. So I remember spending so much time and energy wanting to get the message right, like really focused on these powerful lines. And I was like, this needs to really hit them. Like, I want to change their lives. And I was putting so much time and energy in these power-packed scripts. And then I'd get up there and I would see their heads just kind of move to the side and doodling. Now they're doodling on the floor, or they're just, I was losing them. I remember standing up there in front of, 150 teenagers going, I want them to get this so badly, but I could not pull them in. And at that moment, I was like, I have to change my game here. This is not working. And so I skipped about 5 minutes of content that I had poured so much of my heart and soul into and was like, I need to get to this story. So I bypassed all of the talky talk and started telling a story of someone their age, of a moment from a regular teenage kid's life, a moment of courage, which was the topic that we were talking about in that moment. And I remember seeing their little heads kind of lift up and look a little cautiously curious and kind of stop talking to their neighbor and lean forward a little bit. And they started to engage. And I was like, okay, now I have them. Now I have their interest. Now I have their curiosity. And then I could share some of that powerful message. And so storytelling is, as we know, it is brain friendly. If you're a Brene Brown person, and most coaches are Brene Brown people, she talks about the power of stories. They are so persuasively magical. And so we want to be leveraging them. We want to create story-driven messages on our social media, in those keynote talks that you're developing, in the big time and little time speaking that we do. If we can create a story-driven message, it's going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for us in terms of engaging your audience. So that moment that I had with all of those ninth graders, without realizing it, I was using stories to pull them in, and then I could deliver the message. And that same approach, like basically I had that experience and I was like, I'm going to go figure out what's happening here. So I went to grad school and studied persuasion. And again was like, stories are the persuasive tool. Stories are the magical ingredient that we need, that most coaches honestly skip. And here's why, because we as coaches, we spend a lot of time developing our curriculum, our point of view, all of the smart things, like here are the 3 ways and the framework that I want you to use. And it's very, very much like, here's all the information that's going to change your life. And the truth is, they can find that information anywhere. Like coaches, entrepreneurs, all of our expertise.
Ouch. Ouch.
Ouch is right, but it's so true. Like, same with speaking. I mean, people can go look up YouTube videos and some of my own. I give tons of free information. Like, it's out there. But if we want them to engage with us and walk with us from a coachee relationship, the stories are the things that help them decide to go deeper with us and to pay us to do this transformative work together. Stories are the pathway to do that. If we only lean on what we know, they'll say thank you, and I appreciate that. And this person has some good information. But when we share who we are, when we share our stories, that's when people say, okay, I'm ready, because I recognize my human experience in your human experience. And so I trust this person. I know this person. Even if they don't really know us yet, they start to feel like I have a sense of who this person is. And this is the person I'm going to choose out of the sea of experts out there. This is somebody who's helping shape my point of view, my perspective, my understanding in a much deeper way. So it's really essential, the storytelling piece.
If you're listening to this, you're probably trying to build and scale your online business. Am I right? Then we have just the thing for you, and it's free.
We're building Pensight to enable people like you to set up your online store and monetize your knowledge via courses, one-to-one sessions, group coaching, digital products, Q&As, and bundles. It's purpose-built for you with bonus features such as video recordings, private notes for each client, Zapier integration, calendar sync, analytics, and much, much more to handle your scheduling automatically, accept payments, and help you scale your business.
Check it out at pensight.com. Well, as you just said before, I am ready. I'm convinced. Now you can tell us more about storytelling and how can we use storytelling to build a story to grow our audience? What should we even know about it? Where should we start? And what are the core principles that we should be aware of?
I love this. Yeah. I mean, it is a big idea. I've spent 20 years studying it. And just a few weeks ago, I went to a story-driven experience for myself. And I kind of walked into it. I was like, I've already done all this work. I've found all my stories. I've done all the story work. And of course, it's never done, right? So I walked away. I was like, oh my gosh, I'd forgotten about this. And I can remember to do this. And, it just is an ongoing iterative experience. So just know that. Yes, it's big. Yes, it's ongoing. But here's where you can start. And I offer this to everybody who starts with me. Like, we are a story first, story driven approach as a coach. So that is one of the things that I do differently than a lot of speaking coaches, because a lot of speaking coaches, they start with going, okay, let's perfect your script and let's analyze what you're doing with your body. And it can be a very perfectionist approach. I got to tell you, I don't think audiences care if you do it perfectly. They care if your message resonates. They care if you connect. So one of my mantras that I just have said a gazillion times and will say it forever is perfection kills connection. And so if we are focused on, especially speaking, it can pull all of that up. If we're focused on doing it perfectly, it's going to get in the way of connecting with our audience. And it's one of the reasons why I lean on stories so much, because our imperfect stories are where people will feel the most connected. And they're all around us in the everyday. We have stories happening all around us if we pay attention. And so truly that's where I want you to start, is to start doing what I call, and I borrow this from one of my speakers because she does this so well. She was like, I'm working on seeing with story eyes. I was like, oh, that is beautiful. I want you to start to see the moments that are happening around you and then share them with your audience. Okay, so I use this framework called the Simple Story Framework, and it is a story-first approach in terms of leveraging the stories that are happening around you all the time and sharing the insight from those stories with your audience. And it goes like this. It's very simple. Moment, meaning, and move. And all I want you to do is when you recognize a moment that has happened, something that frankly you are like, oh, I hadn't noticed that before, or that's interesting, or oh my gosh, it made you emotive in some way. You were like, oh, that I felt that, or that was funny, or whatever. Like you had some kind of reaction. You're going to take that moment and then you're going to use the filter of your audience. What meaning does my audience need from this moment? What is the little nugget that I can pull out for them from this moment? You're going to share that with them. And then after you've done that, you're simply going to tell them what's next. What's their next move? So it might be a, more traditional call to action that's like, join me on Friday for this live I'm doing. Maybe it's tell me, what do you think? What's something, how does this connect with you? Like it can be a traditional call to action. It can also just be an invitation for them to think deeply about this. So that can, it can be whatever makes sense within your business at the time. But when you start with your moment, you start with your story, pull meaning from that story to share with your audience, and then tell them what their next move is. If you can leverage that in the everyday on social media, you can use it in your podcast. When you start to use that framework, you're going to start to feel that difference that I felt standing in front of 150 ninth graders, which was, oh, the story is the magic. And when I can follow the story with those nuggets of wisdom, that's when it's really going to connect and have an impact.
Got it. So we have this framework, a triple M. That's how it's sticking in my mind. Moment, meaning, and move. Now, what can we attach to this story already to make it even more powerful, to make the story connect even more to the audience? What are some tricks that we should be aware of?
Oh, good question. So masterful storytelling that really moves your audience, is storytelling that puts us into one specific moment. So a lot of times, it's part of the reason I call stories moments, because a lot of the times when people think they're telling a story, they're really just giving us a generic overview, right? So it's the difference between me saying, I used to talk to teenagers and noticed that when I tell stories, they're more engaging than when I would talk at them and share my brilliant script that wasn't effective, right? It's the difference between that and I remember this one day when I was standing up there and I could start to see how they disengaged. Their heads were down. They're talking to their neighbors, right? So one of those drops us into a specific moment. And why that's so important is because it ignites the brain for your audience. So from an audience perspective, you start to visualize what's happening. You start to see it in our own minds. And as soon as your audience can visualize what's happening, they will remember this moment because they have created it in their own minds. Versus talking about it generically, it stays up in the intellectual realm, like, oh, interesting, but it's not a creative endeavor and they don't feel it in the same way. And persuasion happens when people feel. We think that it's a logical thing, but it's not actually. It is. Logic can kind of seal the deal, but pathos or persuasion or feeling is, that's the key to persuasion.
I am almost speechless just because I love this idea. Persuasion, the feelings are what make it click in the end. Before we go into more depth into persuasion, I would like to take a big step back and ask you, why are stories so relevant to us? You mentioned something, but even deeper, why are stories so valuable? What happens within us, in our mind, in our body, that really makes stories so effective?
They're so magical. We've talked about just generally how important they are because they engage your audience. But what's happening in the brain is so cool. It's recognizing. It's this other human's experience. It's really the root of empathy. So stories have this ability to trigger these mirror neurons. Try saying that. That is really hard. Mirror neurons. They trigger these mirror neurons in your audience's brain. So when you start talking about a story, let's say your story is about your childhood, something that happened on your childhood playground, and you start describing these elements of the playground, the pebbles on the ground, or the monkey bars or the swings. What's happening in your audience's brain is they themselves are starting to think about their childhood playground and what the pebbles felt like underneath their feet, and the freedom they felt when they would swing on the swings. So this mirror neuron triggers this co-creation that happens between the speaker and the audience. So it's half my story as a speaker, but it's half the audience's story, because what they are imagining in their own heads completes the picture. So the more visual we can be with our storytelling, the more we can trigger some of those feelings, the tactile elements of your story, the more that your audience will remember those experiences for themselves. And why that is so important from a persuasion perspective is because we tend to categorize and divide as humans, right? So when you start talking about a topic, I'm like, well, not really that, or that's kind of belongs over here, or I actually think something different from that. Like the logical brain comes in and takes over, and it makes persuasion really, really difficult, especially when we're talking about difficult things or controversial things, and as coaches, like we're trying to nudge people into places and think about things in ways they haven't before. And so stories will slow that part of the brain down and keep them in a more open, emotive space, because they don't know exactly why you're telling the story or what the point of the story is. And so all they're doing is imagining and feeling. And then after they feel the point of the story, then you can come in and tell the point of the story. And that's why not only are stories important, but when you share the story is important. Because if you share the story after you've said all the things, then you're kind of pulling the persuasive rug out from under stories. But if you start with a story, it keeps them open, keeps them curious, and they don't turn on the part of their brain that says, actually, no, or I don't think so, or that belongs over here, or right? They shut down the analysis part of their brain just for a little bit. Now, obviously, we want our audience to think. We don't want them to just feel, because that realm is called manipulation, and that is not what we're doing. We want to get to the thinking part of their brain, but we first want to keep them open to even considering thinking differently about it. So that is the kind of the underbelly of what's happening persuasively with stories. It's so cool.
Got it. Can you repeat that again? You said earlier, feelings is what gets you persuaded in the first place, but it's logic that seals the deal. Is this the way you said it?
Exactly. So logic is kind of the part of the persuasive process that confirms. It's sort of like, yes, okay, so this is for real, right? We kind of second guess our feelings as humans. Like we have these strong feelings, then we're like, Is that real? And then logic can come in, and that's where you can share some stats or some information, and really bolster up what you've created with the feelings first. But feelings are the way that we open ourselves even to the possibility of change and persuasion. So we start with stories first and then come in with the logic afterwards.
I got it. And you were mentioning that details do make a difference when we share these stories. Any specific details that we know that, it's what makes people click? For example, I heard one that was saying that you have to mention a specific date, like a day, let's say 14th of August. Is this real? And if so, what are other things that are worth mentioning? Maybe things that we can see, smell, taste. What are these things?
So I love the specificity of on the 14th of August. Right? What works about that is not necessarily that it's the 14th of August, but the fact that it is one specific moment. So we talked about that a little bit ago, that rather than it being a generic thing that's not actually a story, we want to drop people into one moment. So that helps us get really specific because you start to imagine a specific moment in time. So it's like, where were you? What was happening there? So I think some of those details of day of the week or the time, even like it was a Wednesday, that lets us know from an audience perspective, oh my gosh, this was a real singular moment. And it triggers that imaginative connection, which is really the next part of it. So how can we help them see what we're talking about? So as you're describing your story, what did it look like? What did it feel like? What color was the shirt? What did you see? What did you notice? Like all of those things, it's sort of like you're helping this person sketch it out in their brains and fill out some of those details. Now, one of the challenges is if people go too far on that, it takes people somewhere else. And so you want to include only the details that help lead them to the next place in your story. Okay. Because it's not a novel. We don't have the time that a novel has to really go in and describe all of the things. We have a limited amount of time. And so we want to include enough details that it triggers that imaginative connection and they really start to visually see it in their own heads. And the last little bit I'd share with you that can help really trigger this co-creation with your audience is the use of dialogue, which is a really simple thing that is so, so powerful. So even just giving language to one of the quote unquote characters in your story, that helps bring it alive. It makes it feel like it's happening right there in front of us. And it helps us, from a imaginative perspective, it's like, oh my gosh, I can see somebody saying that because I'm literally hearing them say it with you. It's a really little thing. You don't have to do dialogue the whole story, but even just a moment of dialogue takes the story to a whole nother place persuasively.
I love this last tip with the dialogue. So you said we are getting started with this stories, the triple M, where we describe an action. And this is a great exercise for us to discover the power of storytelling and to learn more about how to think and write in this way. Now, I know that storytelling is also very important when it comes to the story about ourselves, the brand story. Let's put it like this, the us story. And that is really powerful for coaches. What is something that we should know as coaches when we create that us story? How can we make it more relevant? How can we make it more powerful?
Yeah. Well, it's really a lifelong journey to tell the story of your why, like your reason for being. Because as coaches, for most of us, the story of us, the story of your why is your origin story. In other words, the how did you get to be doing what you're doing? And if that does not feel a little vulnerable, if that does not feel a little bit like, I'm really revealing something here, then my guess is you haven't dug deep enough yet. The best stories, the most impactful, effective stories are revealing a little something. Now, it doesn't have to be like sharing it all and you're like, in tears every time you tell it, but it has to have this really gut truth to it that you have learned. And it has gotten you to where you are today. So those level of origin stories, the part of the reason they're so important is because your audience will recognize themselves in the journey. And if you have not taken the time to really think about and reflect on and dig into a little bit of what are the parts of the journey, your own journey, that your audience is experiencing. What tripped you up? And is it tripping them up? Probably, right? Because we're all humans and the same things tend to trip us up. And so if we're not sharing the trip ups, if we're not sharing the journey of how we got where we're going, and we only share the success of where we are, it's going to really alienate your audience. And so, it just takes a lot of time and reflection and a willingness to be vulnerable and real, and share the challenges along the way.
Do we have to be strategic about the way we create the story, in the sense that we have to align that with what we think will trigger, let's say, our target clients? Do we have to be a bit strategic and adjust the story in such a way that we think it will impact the most the people we want to attract?
Yeah. To make it the most effective it can be, then it's worth doing that for sure. I like to think my business coach is amazing, and he thinks of stories as like a diamond. And he said, our lives is, our whole life is a story. And there's a million different ways that you can come at it, and it refracts all over the place. And so your story is not done yet. It's always iterating and growing and changing. Your perspective on your own story as you grow and change will grow and change. And so it's not a static thing. And the other layer, which is really important, is what you want to pull from that story is going to really change depending on who you're talking to, where you are, what they need in this moment. So it's when we say like, share your story, it's like, it's not like you write a script and then that's it forever and ever, all, done. It's an ongoing process of getting clear on the ways in which your story connects with your audience and how that connection really invites people into your business. So I think of it as a Venn diagram of you, your audience, and your business. Like, where do those pieces overlap? And your life is behind that. Like, what are the elements you can pull that are going to be most helpful to your audience and pull them into your business at the same time?
Got it. Just because I want to ask you some things about speaking before we end this conversation. Any last important things that we need to know about storytelling? Any valuable pieces of information that can make a difference for us? Yes.
This is all learned and learnable. So there is not some special sauce that people have or don't have. I probably have some genetic gifts that make this a little easier and make it something that I wanted to pursue, versus most people are like, I know I should, I know I need to, I think maybe I can. But there's a lot of imposter syndrome that comes along with speaking. So let me just right off the bat, at the end of our conversation, make sure everybody hears me when I say that you can do this. There's no special unicorns in speaking. The mantra that I say a lot is not take something that you don't have within you. It is all learned and learnable. So know that. And it takes practice. People don't suddenly become easy breezy about it. It takes time to get there. And so if you're willing to put in the risk of learning publicly, you'll be fine. You got this. You can absolutely, totally do it.
Well, I feel empowered. I feel empowered and ready to go. It's all about the work that we put in, and then we're probably going to see improvements. I wanted to ask you, why are we afraid of speaking in the first place?
Well, judgment. It's a vulnerable thing. What are people going to think? And we're putting ourselves out there. And it's part of the reason why we tend to hide behind our expertise versus starting with our stories. Because the story is like saying, oh, hi, this is me. Oh, hi. Now you are really seeing me. And you are being seen. And you have to allow yourself to be seen as a speaker. It's hard. It's hard. So I don't want to pretend that that it's not. And I also don't want people to try and become bulletproof in that process. Like, it's vulnerable, and that's a good thing because that's what people connect with. They connect with your vulnerabilities. So it just takes a willingness to move through that, to walk into rejection, potentially, and know that that is just part of it, but that the benefits outweigh the rejection. But they do go hand in hand. So who wants it? Who wants to just like step into rejection and vulnerability all the time? But as coaches, right? As coaches, this is our work. This is what we are pushing our people to do. And so we ourselves need to take on that mantle as well and do the work, do the internal work so that we can show up and really serve and really impact people.
I've been part of multiple, obviously, coaching conferences, speaking events, and so on. And in many of them, I've seen this point where now it's your turn. Turn your mobile on and just do that live right now, or do that video right now, publish it. And let's say most of the times it goes well. People have this sort of revelations and they feel good and the adrenaline kicks in. But I've also seen multiple cases where something happened afterwards. It felt good, but they didn't continue afterwards, or they went back to that barrier or fear. What happens then, and how can they move forward?
Yeah, it's truly a game of consistency. So even for me, I like doing this. I enjoy it. It's obviously a critical part of my work and my identity. If I go too long without getting on social, for example, and going live, it feels harder. So the more you do it, the easier it gets. And if you step out of it, you just really have to push yourself back in and trust that once you're back into it, it is really very much like riding a bike, and you can get back into it. It's like, but you got to get over the hurdle. So scheduling for yourself and sticking to it, and not making this be a thing where it's like, it's not that important. It actually really is, because if you think about the potential of speaking on the free stages of social media, that is impact. Like, how jazzed would you be to, like, oh, only 150 people saw my stories. It's like, if you were in a room with 150 people, you'd be really excited about that, right? That's a big opportunity. So don't undercut the potential of it. And remember that it's trust building, your connection building. It's the know, like, and trust factor that you can really turn on when you show up story first.
Gotcha. And I have two more questions for you. We're going to be super quick about it. What is the know, like, and trust factor?
So know, like, and trust is, it doesn't come from me. I don't even know. I feel like that it's a marketing term out there that is our job as we are showing up to serve our audience, when we're building that connection with them in the journey of them deciding whether or not you are their coach. So as somebody is kind of checking you out and trying to figure out, do I want to join this program? Do I want to do, is this the coach that I want for myself? They're looking at coaches, and what they're deciding for themselves is, do I know this person? Do I like this person? Do I trust this person? And so one of the ways you can build know, like, trust is by showing your face and speaking your stories. and not hiding behind the things that we tend to hide behind because it's safer, it's less vulnerable. It might, I don't think it takes less time. I think going live can be really efficient and short and sweet, but it does tend to be, especially in this world of video, can feel really vulnerable.
Gotcha. Last question for today.
Yes.
Sally, tips on public speaking. What do we do with the hands? What do we do with the eyes? We look at the camera. Give us 3 and we're done.
That could be a whole other thing, Maria. I love it. You're like, real quick. Give us your 20 years. But the truth is, it's way simpler than we think. And when we overthink and over choreograph our bodies, and when we're like, okay, I want to put my hands like this at this point, and I want to move over here at this point, it can feel inauthentic, and really disconnecting for your audience because it doesn't feel real. And most importantly, people want to feel like they know you. They want to feel an authentic connection. So what that means is for us, in terms there's nothing like speaking to make you wonder like what to do with your hands. It's like, why do I feel like an awkward 7th grader suddenly? I'm an adult. I'm a credible person. What's going on? Well, if you get to that moment, what you really need to do is let your emotions and your commitment to what you're saying drive the physical response, because the body will follow commitment. So don't worry so much about your hands. Worry about being committed, and worry about connecting with your audience, connecting to what you're saying and making it meaningful for your audience. Don't worry about flubbing up your lines. Don't worry about like a misspeaking moment or filler words, okay? Unless any of those things become distracting, it's not a problem. And it's a lot harder to get to the level of distraction than we think.
Well, I'm so happy I asked this question because this, at least for me, this is a game changer. So I'm really glad I asked this. Now, Sally, where can people find you? What should they reach out for?
Yeah, I am on all the socials. I really have a lot of fun on Instagram, so you can find me there. My handle is SallyZ_BeMoved. And I'd love to connect over there. I also, if you're curious about this Story First framework, you can grab that. It's a PDF download, and there's some support emails that come along with it to give you some ideas for how you can really leverage this. So you can get that at bemoved.com/SSF for Simple Story Framework.
You heard her, ladies and gentlemen. Go download that ebook. I'm going to do that myself because I got to get better at all those stories. And I think you are the person that can help me with that. Sally, it has been an absolute pleasure. I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you to our dear listeners who stick with us till the end. And any last words for the audience?
I'm already proud of you for even thinking about this, truly. I know it takes courage to do it. I know it takes courage to show up, to show your face, to speak your stories, but it is worth it. This is how you can really live out your purpose and transform the lives of the people that you work with. And that's what we want to do as coaches. So I feel you. I'm cheering you on. I'm in your corner. And I cannot wait to see more of your stories out there in the world.
Amen to that. Thank you so much. Nothing else to add. Just see you all to the next episode of the Coach Tribe podcast. Have a good one, everyone. Bye-bye. Hope you enjoyed this episode.
We'll be releasing every Wednesday, so make sure to
subscribe
and rate us 5 stars where you're listening to this show to give others a chance to discover it too.
Sally, can you tell us more about the power of
Perfection kills connection, Maria. That's good. Persuasion. It's a tough word. It's a tough word. Persuasion.
Persuasion.